CBS News 24/7. I'm Juliette Goodrich. We begin with a live look at the Vatican, where people from around the world are remembering Pope Francis. The Vatican says the 88-year-old pontiff died early this morning of a stroke that led to coma and irreversible heart failure. His death came just hours after he made his final public appearance on Easter Sunday. The Catholic Church has begun a 9-day period of mourning. Vatican officials will preside over a solemn ritual, placing the Pope's body in a coffin, which will eventually be placed at St. Peter's Basilica. Pope Francis will lie in state there for several days to allow people to pay their respects. The Pope will be buried between the 4th and 6th days of mourning at the Basilica of St. Mary Major, a 5th century church in Rome dedicated to the Virgin Mary. The Vatican held a rosary prayer in St. Peter's Square in its first public commemoration. Francis earned the nickname the People's Pope during his 12 years leading the church. CBS News Papal and Vatican contributor Monsignor Anthony Figueiredo joins us live now from Rome. Monsignor Figueiredo, thank you so much for being here on this very solemn day. Why don't we first begin with the legacy that the Pope meant to the Catholic Church?
I think, thank you. Such an emotional roller coaster for us, the whole church as priests. We've not only lost a pope, personally, we've lost a father. What is his legacy? 3 days ago, Pope Francis was in a prison. He met the prisoners. Yesterday, he went around the square of St. Peter's and began to greet people. He wanted to bless them, he wanted to love them, he wanted to welcome them. He said to parents, bring your children into my Pope-mobile. That is the legacy of Pope Francis. He's the people's Pope. He wants to be with people, he wants to love them, he wants to care for them. Pope Francis, from the beginning of his papacy, said, this is a field hospital. The church is not a place for the selected. It's a place where everyone is very, very welcome. And his papacy has continued in that direction. People are excluded. It may be the immigrants. It may be the disabled. It may be the aged. It may be the people who are disabled. Pope Francis wants to reach out to everyone to the very end of his life. Remember, his very last words, Happy Easter, and then he went on into a Pope-mobile, greeted everyone in the square. I believe that is his great legacy. I'm a Pope of the people. I am the people's Pope.
How very special to have had that moment on Easter Sunday. Can you explain to us what happens after a Pope dies?
I will, thank you, yes. It's amazing, you know, the church has a very well-oiled machine. So we have a pope who has died. Now, this evening we are in St. Peter's Square. This evening we have the Camerlengo, the Chamberlain of the Pope who has gone, certified the death of the Pope, sealed the apartments, crushed the ring of the Holy Father, which said this is the seal that seals every single document of our papacy. The Pope now has died. Now we enter into a new period, an interregnum, a period between the death of this Pope and the next Pope. What happens now? The Pope's death has been certified. He is laid out in Santa Marta. On Wednesday, the Pope will be carried into St. Peter's Basilica. Thousands, hundreds of thousands, will go and venerate this Pope. They loved this Pope. He loved them. On a date that has yet to be decided, the funeral will take place. That must take place 4 to 6 days after the death of the Pope. This will take place in the days ahead. The Pope will be buried, not in St. Peter's Basilica. Another great change. because the Pope has said his testament came out this evening, a beautiful last will and testament. I want to be buried in my favourite church dedicated to the Virgin Mary, St. Mary Major. It's amazing. That is a beautiful testament. He says, I want to be buried in the ground. I want to be buried with the people. I want to be buried with my name, Francis, not Pope Francis, but Francis. This is amazing for every one of us. Once Pope Francis is buried, then we think about the next Pope. So cardinals begin to arrive in Rome, and they begin to say, what is the date of the next conclave? What are the issues we need to discuss? The conclave must take place 2 weeks, 15 days after today, and so we moved together towards a new Pope. It's an amazing moment of history, really amazing for us, for the whole church, for the whole world.
Well, we thank you for being here on this moment and sharing that and the history and legacy as well. Thank you, Monsignor Figueiredo. The selection of Pope Francis brought many firsts to the Catholic Church. He was the first pope to choose St. Francis of Assisi as his new name, calling St. Francis the man of poverty, the man of peace, the man who loves and protects creation. He was both the first pope from the Americas and the first non-European pope, being born in Argentina. He's also the first Jesuit pope. The Jesuits are a religious order focused on education, ministry, and finding God in all things. The White House is also honoring the life of Pope Francis by flying flags at half-staff. And that is where we find CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi. So, Olivia, President Trump just posting an update on Truth Social. What did he say?
And Julia, we have a little bit of news here. President Trump says he and First Lady Melania Trump will be heading to Rome for the funeral of Pope Francis. Now, we don't know when that funeral will be, but as we just heard from the Monsignor there, it's anywhere between 5 days and 7 days after the Pope passes. So at some point within the next week, the president says he will be heading to Rome to celebrate the life of Pope Francis. And as you note as well, flags are flying here today at half-staff on this Easter Monday. We also heard from the president earlier today during the Easter egg roll, a tradition that unfortunately was overshadowed today by the death of Pope Francis. Take a listen to what he had to say here about honoring the late Pope.
He was a good man, worked hard, he loved the world, and it's an honor to do that.
Also quite notable yesterday, Vice President J.D. Vance was in Rome for Easter Sunday, where he actually met with the Pope face-to-face for just a few minutes. Now, advisors I spoke to on the Vance team were not sure that that meeting would happen, given that Pope's health has been deteriorating over the last several months, but they were able to have that meeting, and it was the last meeting that a U.S. official had with this Pope, unfortunately, as he passed. Now, Vance is continuing on that trip on to India, but we are told that flags will continue flying here at half-mast until the sunset on the day of internment for the Pope. And as we noted earlier, the president is expected to attend that funeral with First Lady Melania Trump.
Yeah, Olivia, thank you. While we have you at the White House for more updates on fresh on the heels we call Signal Gate, let's talk about Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. He's back in the hot seat for what we're learning is a second group chat. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, we learned about this over the weekend, a second Signal group chat where Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth had shared information, and in that group chat included his wife, who is not a Department of Defense official, but also his brother, who is his brother, and Tim Parlatore, who is a lawyer who is working with Hegseth. So quite notable there. Now, the Department of Defense is saying that no classified information was shared in that group chat, but nonetheless remains that the Defense Secretary is still sharing some information about related strikes to the Houthi rebels in Yemen on Signal, which is an encrypted chat, but not exactly the most secure channel to be discussing those types of things. Take a listen to what he has to say here about this specific controversy earlier today at that Easter egg roll at the White House.
They take anonymous sources from disgruntled former employees and then they try to slash and burn people and ruin their reputations. Not going to work with me, because we're changing the Defense Department, putting the Pentagon back in the hands of warfighters, and anonymous smears from disgruntled former employees on old news doesn't matter.
Now, questions remain about whether Hegseth can remain in his role as the Pentagon chief, but the White House says for now they're sticking behind him. Juliet?
Olivia Rinaldi, thank you. Well, meantime, a Nebraska lawmaker becomes the first House Republican to suggest President Trump fire the Secretary of Defense. In an interview with Politico, Representative Don Bacon called Pete Hegseth a, quote, amateur person. Bacon said, quote, if it's true that he had another signal chat with his family about the missions against the Houthis, it's totally unacceptable, adding, I'm not going to tell the White House how to manage this, but I find it unacceptable, and I wouldn't tolerate it if I was in charge. All right, on to Wall Street. Stocks sink in the face of tariff uncertainty and President Trump's escalating attacks on Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. So the closing bell rang just moments ago. The Dow fell nearly 1,000 points. The S&P 500 down more than 2.6%. So let's take you over here to our interactive stock market heat map. This is brought to you by FinViz, showing the top 500 stocks today. Practically everything in the red, as you can see. CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady here now to break it down and walk through what's happening in the markets today. Hi, Kelly.
Hey there, Jules. Yeah, another big day in the red to kick off the week. There's really two things that drove the markets down today. And one, as you mentioned, is this back and forth when it comes to the Federal Reserve. So we saw a little bit of back and forth between President Trump and Fed Chair Powell last week. That continued this morning when just after the markets opened, right around 9:40, President Trump, I do think we have the post, I'll read from it, said in part, preemptive cuts in interest rates are being called for by many. With energy costs way down, food prices substantially lower, there can be a slowing of the economy unless Mr. Too Late, a major loser, lowers interest rates. Now, he was referencing Fed Chair Powell, and as it stands right now, there is no legal precedent for the president to get rid of Fed Chair Powell without cause. It can't be just because he doesn't like his interest rate policy. But Jules, just this back and forth is creating a lot of uneasiness for investors, that there is even the hint that we could be approaching a legal fight, or even a possibility where there might be a new Fed chair that is more easily influenced by the White House. Traditionally, you have the Fed separate from the White House so that there isn't any influence or impact on monetary policy. So that's one thing. Even if that is something that does not happen eventually, there's just a lot of concern among investors. The other thing, Jules, is we haven't seen any trade deals yet. And I talked to a number of investors over the weekend that said, look, we were excited after the White House's reciprocal tariffs were put on pause for 90 days, but we are not seeing any of these trade deals that the White House has teased come to fruition. And there's just a little bit of uneasiness that may be weeks or maybe months into the future, Jules.
All right. So another measure investors are watching, and I haven't talked to you about this yet, is the U.S. dollar. So what's happening there?
So the value of the dollar, which is very important, right? Think about whenever you go abroad and you change your money, it's always good for the dollar to be of higher value than that currency because your dollar goes further. Or if you're a company that's buying from another country and importing, you want your dollar to go further. So the dollar value has dropped to its lowest levels since 2022. And essentially the reason is everything that I just talked about: uncertainty amongst investors and a lack of willingness to put money into U.S. assets. In fact, we're seeing a lot of U.S. assets, whether it be the dollar or whether it be the bond market, sell off. And normally these are traditional safe havens because you get a good return. The U.S. economy is considered a very safe environment. The government's always going to pay its debts. But with all of this talk of the Fed and just tariffs and trade war in general, investors are not feeling as comfortable about the U.S. dollar and the U.S. economy, Jules.
All right, Kelly O'Grady. Kelly, thank you. A Delta plane catches fire. The scary moments for passengers next. Stay with us. You're watching CBS News 24/7. The The Supreme Court has put a pause on deportations of Venezuelans under the Alien Enemies Act. Justices Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito dissented. So this comes after an appeal by the American Civil Liberties Union. CBS News Department of Justice reporter Jake Rosen is live. So, Jake, thanks for joining us. What does this mean and what comes next in the case?
Well, it's unclear what the Supreme Court could exactly order. We know that last time the Supreme Court said that the migrants at hand in this case, who the Trump administration wanted to deport, were entitled to some kind of due process. And they said that it had to be substantive. But what that really means is murky. And so we saw the Trump administration, as they've set to resume these orders and deportations around the country, started moving people to a base in Texas, a detention center that is private and that ICE uses to conduct deportations. They came from all around the country, and the ACLU, in an attempt to stop them, basically filed lawsuits in places like Colorado, in that place in Texas, tried to kind of revamp the lawsuit that is here in D.C. over all this, and tried to ask judges for an emergency stop, saying that we have evidence that these deportations were underway again, and that the Trump administration was disobeying the Supreme Court order to make sure that these men, before they're deported, have an opportunity not just to be told that they're being deported, but also to have a reasonable amount of time to find a way to appeal and have a judge hear their case, or at least have the opportunity to have lawyers file some kind of intervention. It's certainly the big issue at hand here that the Supreme Court can decide on is how much time is necessary. The Associated Press argued in court on Friday that they want 30 days notice in English and Spanish before the deportations resume. They had no objection to the fact that these deportations can continue because the Supreme Court has ordered it. The Trump administration says that they basically, hey, we handed you a piece of paper. It says that you're about to be deported. That they believe serves as notice. Certainly more to come on this in the next couple of days. But we've seen the kind of this shotgun blast approach by these legal groups trying to stop these deportations at many different levels around the government.
Yeah, and Jake, we've learned the mistakenly deported Maryland man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, was actually moved to a different prison in El Salvador. What are the details there?
Well, this completely contradicts what the Department of Justice had put in their daily filings for over a week in the case of Mr. Abrego Garcia. We saw the first update from the Department of Justice last Saturday, so this was 9 days ago now, and the Department of Justice said they believed that Mr. Abrego Garcia was alive and being held at CCOT, that Supermax prison in El Salvador, where attorneys from many different clients who are down there hoping to potentially be freed or have their case heard say that there's such a fear of violence and violence in this prison that they believe their lives are at danger and they need to get out of it. And we saw when Senator Chris Van Hollen came back on Friday from visiting with Mr. Abrego Garcia that he was told that actually before that first status report went in that he was moved to a different facility with furniture, not a Supermax prison, but some kind of detention center in El Salvador, and he's being currently held there. He did say that the conditions were certainly better. There was no fear of retaliation by any potential gang members who are after him. Obviously, he's very well known in these because of media reports and all the attention on this case. But really, there's been no real significant action by the government to bring him back. The only thing that we know is that the Department of Justice confirmed that Mr. Abrego Garcia had been moved to this place. And there will be more to come the next week as a judge is waiting on the final set of expedited fact-finding in front of her so that she can make a decision as to whether Mr. Abrego Garcia and the government's lack of bringing him home is a move that she can find in contempt of court to hold someone accountable for disobeying her order. But we have yet to see any big movement from the Trump administration, as they've said continually, even into the weekend, that they're not going to bring him back.
All right, Jake Rosen. Jake, thank you. CBS News has learned Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem's purse was stolen over the weekend at a popular restaurant in Washington, D.C. Sources tell us her purse contained personal items, including her driver's license, passport, her DHS access badge, checks, and about $3,000 in cash. The Secret Service is investigating and looking for the suspect. All right, cell phone video to our monitors out of Orlando. It shows flames shooting out of a Delta passenger plane at Orlando International Airport. So let's get to our breaking news correspondent, Chanel Call, in the CBS newsroom in New York to explain what happened. Hi, Chanel.
Hey, Jules, good to see you. So some dramatic video to show you of this scene that played out at the Orlando International Airport earlier today. The Federal Aviation Authority says Delta Flight 1213's engine caught fire on the tarmac. Take a look at that video here on your screen. This happened at around 11 o'clock this morning, and passengers, we're told, were forced to evacuate the plane on these emergency slides. Take a listen to one passenger's account of what happened.
We had just pulled away from the gate and we're starting to taxi. I was sitting in row 35 with my friend. I was against the window, had my window shade down, was getting ready for a nap. And then I heard some people yelling fire. So I opened the window, looked, and there was a fire on the engine. And then it flared up. But then when they cut the engines, it went down pretty quickly and just lots of smoke. Initially, the crews told everyone to stay seated and stay calm. And then a couple minutes later, we got the evacuation order and they deployed the slides.
So, Jules, the airline had later said that flames were seen in the tailpipe of one of the plane's two main engines. The fire was pretty quickly contained. This plane, though, I should mention, is really big. It was an Airbus 13 scheduled to fly from Orlando to Atlanta today. And we also know there were 200 passengers on board, 10 flight attendants and 2 pilots. Luckily, though, no one was injured.
How is Delta responding? Have they issued any kind of response?
Yeah, in a statement, Jules, Delta says, quote, "We appreciate our customers' cooperation and apologize for the experience. Nothing is more important than safety, and Delta teams will work to get our customers to their final destinations as soon as possible." Delta also says that maintenance teams will now examine this aircraft. And, Jules, we know the FAA will investigate exactly how this happened.
Yeah, absolutely. A big investigation. All right, Chanel Call, thank you. Classes resumed at Florida State University today after 2 people were killed in a mass shooting last week. Meanwhile, victims of the shooting are recovering at a local hospital. So there's new video. It shows Madison Askins walking the halls of Tallahassee Memorial Hospital. Her father says she was moved out of the ICU to the general floor over the weekend. CBS News reporter Katie Weiss has the latest on the survivors and the investigation into the shooting.
Well, we've just received word that 3 total victims who were shot in this attack here on FSU's campus have been released from the hospital as of Monday. And we're told that 2 other people who are still in the hospital are expected to be released later this afternoon, which is certainly some good news in the midst of this tragic event that did claim the lives of 2 men who were working on campus. We're told 1 other person remaining in the hospital is still in good condition. Now, police also say the alleged shooter who's in the hospital still, once he's released from the hospital, he will be charged criminally. In the meantime, the school's president says this time of year is close to finals and graduation, and so classes are back in session today, just 5 days following a deadly shooting that killed 2 men working here on campus. The school is excusing all absences following pushback from students that today was too soon to return. Now, the school has provided counseling resources for all students here on campus, and the university is also currently evaluating potential financial assistance options for those students who were shot and injured in this deadly attack. Back to you.
Let's get to some breaking news now. Nadine Menendez, wife of former Senator Bob Menendez, has been convicted of collecting bribes with her husband. Bob Menendez was convicted on the same charges last year. He is set to serve an 11-year prison term. FBI agents found gold bars and $480,000 in cash stuffed, hidden in the couple's home during a raid back in 2022. Deadly storms hitting parts of the U.S. over the weekend. Here's video in central Arkansas. It shows heavy rain just pounding the area. In Oklahoma, the severe weather is being blamed for killing at least 3 people, including a 12-year-old boy. CBS News correspondent Jason Allen reports on the damage from hard-hit communities like Ada, Oklahoma.
There's pretty significant damage on the north side of Ada, Oklahoma from this storm system that came through Saturday night and then into Sunday. One of the buildings that probably has some of the most damage is this hotel back here. The entire roof ripped off of that hotel. There's some long-term residents there, so sheriff deputies saying they had to move about 24 people and find a new place for them. Then the tornado comes and hits this business right next door. This was a portable business, a portable building business. So I was just talking to the owner who told me he had 20 different sheds and outbuildings and tiny homes and carports, and now all of it basically look like it's in one big pile. This is next door to a car dealership, and all of this debris was thrown into the garages, some of the service shops that they had here at the car dealership. At least preliminarily, with the Weather Service looking at this and their survey teams, they're talking about possibly an EF1 tornado, so winds more than 100 miles per hour. And Ada was just hit by a storm a month ago in a different part of the city, so they finished cleaning up from that, and now they have this. And the severe weather threat isn't over. Storms are expected to spark up into the middle of this week again, bringing more potentially damaging wind and hail to this region. Jason Allen, CBS News in Ada, Oklahoma.
Well, our hearts certainly go out to the area there, those folks in that area, especially in Ada, Oklahoma. Zoe Mintz joining me now to talk about the weather there, and hopefully will they get a little bit of a break?
Today they'll have the chance to pick up the pieces.
Okay.
8 confirmed tornadoes on Saturday. So they definitely need to have a break, which today is, but tomorrow more severe weather on the way. So let's look at that because, yes, more severe weather threats for parts of Oklahoma, for parts of Texas, as this large storm system blew through yesterday. It continued to track across the central parts of the United States, and right now it's making its way over Mississippi, Alabama, and up near Ohio, Pennsylvania, where there is that very slight potential of maybe an isolated severe thunderstorm tonight, but this is a level 1 out of 5 on our severe weather scale. That bigger risk for severe weather, like I said to Jules, will arrive tomorrow over parts of Oklahoma and Texas once again, where there is going to be another storm system setting up with damaging winds, large hail, maybe even an isolated tornado, again developing over parts of New Mexico and Texas right along the border, and then continuing to travel up to parts of Oklahoma. So let's break down the details on the timing of that upcoming system, because again, it is not going to arrive until later tomorrow afternoon and evening. Today's frontal boundary really is only going to bring that better potential of heavy rain and severe weather down across Mississippi, Alabama, and maybe parts of Ohio and Pennsylvania. That heavier rain will stick around overnight and into early tomorrow, where upwards of 2 inches of rain is expected along that Mississippi-Alabama border. The bigger potential for severe weather, though, again, will be popping up tomorrow afternoon and evening, and it will continue again to track along Texas over to Oklahoma, where large hail and damaging winds definitely going to be that biggest threat, especially over the panhandle of Florida and up to the panhandle of Oklahoma. We are going to be seeing about a 15% risk of hail over an inch in diameter and gusty winds over 60 to 70 miles an hour. The good news with this system, if there is any, is that the tornado risk is very, very small. If it does happen, it'll be right along that Texas-New Mexico border, where we're all going to be keeping our eyes on it. But at least tornadic threat, again, slightly lower with this system. It's the damaging winds, the hail. You're probably going to want to cover up your cars if you have to park outside, because large hail definitely damaging this time of year.
All right, good warnings and good information. Thank you. Millions of people are remembering Pope Francis. Will have much more reaction from across the country next. You're watching CBS News 24/7. We continue our coverage of the death of Pope Francis with a live look out at Vatican City. The 88-year-old pontiff earned the nickname the People's Pope due to his humble style and efforts to make the church more welcoming. This moment marks a major loss for the nearly 1.4 billion Catholics around the world. Many of those followers concentrated in Latin America and parts of Africa. A reminder for our viewers, Pope Francis sat as the first non-European pope in the Vatican, hailing from Argentina. So here in the United States, 61 million people identify as Catholic. That accounts for roughly 18.7% of the population, making it the single largest religious body in the country. People across the country are remembering the Pope. CBS News Bay Area reporter Veronica Macias spoke with members of a church in San Francisco.
Here at Mission Dolores, the oldest Catholic church in San Francisco, a connection to Pope Francis. The mission also named after St. Francis of Assisi. This morning, parishioners arriving to church telling us they learned of the news in service this morning, telling us that despite the Pope's age and his recent illness, many in disbelief given the fact that he seemed to be on his road to recovery. Just yesterday, seen at Easter service, blessing people. Parishioners telling us that they believe he will be remembered as a great Pope and one who brought people together.
He led the church, he shepherded the church where the church should be, not only in the church inside, but he told the people, the bishops, the seminarians, go into the periphery, go where the people are. Do not wait for them to come to the church, then go.
I think the Pope made is that he cared about the world.
How so?
A human being was a human being. He didn't make a difference.
His ability to relate to people, because he just lit up any space that he went to, and he made an effort to reach out to particularly women and children.
Already people have started to leave flowers here this morning. Father Francis telling us that he did his sabbatical studies back in 2013 when Pope Francis was elected. And important to note here at Mission Dolores, Pope John Paul II was here back in 1987.
Our CBS News stations have reporters spread out across the country covering the passing of the Pope. Here's some coverage from earlier. We start in New York.
The first Mass of the day just ended here at St. Pat's, and it, of course, was led by Cardinal Dolan. It was a very small but solemn crowd. In the middle of the stage, we saw there was a portrait of Pope Francis surrounded by candles and flowers, and right next to it was a chalice that he actually gifted Cardinal Dolan when he visited the city back in 2015. Dolan was smiling as he spoke with reporters, reflecting on the life, legacy, and passing of the Pope, calling it well choreographed in a way that the Pope was able to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ with millions of Catholics around the world, and that his last words heard by parishioners yesterday were, "Have a blessed Easter."
Yeah, our city had a special connection with Pope Francis ever since he famously visited Philadelphia about 10 years ago this September. And of course, he made his way all around the city. One of the stops he made was here at the Cathedral Basilica of Saints Peter and Paul. He actually stood on the stairs right behind where I am and waved to the cheering crowd before making his way inside for Mass. And this morning, the church's clergy are paying their respects to the late pontiff. I want to show you what it looked like inside the Basilica this morning. You can see that they've set up a small shrine here for Pope Francis, placing his picture in between two single candles so that people can pray for the Pope.
I want to note that we just heard church bells here ringing for about 5 minutes straight at the end of the 8 o'clock Easter Monday morning Mass here at Holy Name Cathedral. We know so many people have been showing up for Mass here this morning for the holiday, but also because of this news of Pope Francis passing away. I want to quickly touch on a statement that was just released in the last hour by Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson. He says in part, Pope Francis, the people's Pope, will be remembered as a faith leader who gave voice to the voiceless. We will continue to learn from Pope Francis and take inspiration from the power of his moral clarity.
That was coverage from our CBS News stations across the country. Google faces off against the federal government, the court showdown that could change the future of the tech giant. Next. Welcome back. TikToks are going viral, urging people to buy direct from China to avoid inflated prices. But are the videos legit? CBS News confirmed looked into them, so here's what we know.
You might have seen these TikToks pop up on your feed recently, urging people to buy direct from China.
You won't believe the prices we give you.
They follow a similar pattern, telling people to stop buying directly from big-name brands like Nike and Lululemon and to buy from wholesalers instead. Other videos like this are from the factories themselves, urging consumers to buy luxury goods direct from the source instead of the inflated prices they'll get elsewhere, either hiked up by the middleman or as a result of President Trump's tariffs. CBS News confirmed took a closer look. We found at least 7 of these TikTok accounts appear to be connected. They often use the same catchphrases, follow each other online, and show up in each other's content. The people making these videos often have multiple accounts under similar handles, likely so they can keep their followers in case one profile gets banned. We also looked into where some of these brands actually make their products. A Lululemon spokesperson said the company only manufactures around 3% of finished goods in mainland China. Louis Vuitton's manufacturing locations are all in Europe and the US. So are these videos legit? Probably not. Major manufacturers often sign legal agreements to protect the brand's product. The videos are most likely selling a high-quality counterfeit rather than the real deal. But we can't say for sure. The bottom line, if it's too good to be true, it probably is.
Our social team has so much great content like this on our TikTok and Instagram pages, so please follow us at the handle CBS News Confirmed and CBS News. All right, the future of Google search is back in the hands of a federal judge. Google and the Justice Department returned to court to fight over the best fix for Google's monopoly in internet search. So if the DOJ does get its way, Google could be forced to sell its Chrome browser. What does all of this mean? Let's bring in tech journalist Yasmin Khorram with the proposal from the DOJ and what is happening in this realm.
Well, the DOJ wants to break up Google.
Okay.
So last August, a federal judge found that Google is acting as a monopolist when it comes to its search engine, search engine Chrome. So DOJ says, let's start here. You should divest Chrome, which is super popular, has nearly 4 billion users worldwide, and more importantly, holds 2/3 of the market. The DOJ also says that Google should disclose consumer data and pull back on investments and acquisitions. If we look back at the original case, it found that Google spent about $20 billion to the likes of Apple and Samsung to make sure that it was the pre-selected internet browser on your phone. So what does that mean? It means more customers equals more data and equals more revenue. The DOJ says that is anti-competitive.
Okay, so we do know that Google is pushing back pretty hard on this proposal.
Yes.
So then what's the argument from Google right now?
Yes, so Google is pushing back hard. They say that the DOJ's proposal would hurt consumers, hurt technology, and hurt the economy. They say that, hey, we have invested heavily in making our search engine #1. We shouldn't be punished if we can outpay our competitors for prime placement. They also say that the DOJ's proposals would hurt consumer privacy, consumer security, and it would stifle innovation.
Okay, so let's talk about regulatory pressure. I assume Google's facing a lot of that. What else do they face?
Yes, so right now, 2 separate federal judges have ruled that Google is a monopoly. This one is about its search engine, and in a separate trial last week, a federal judge ruled that Google runs an illegal monopoly when it comes to its ad tech. So 2 separate judges, monopolies, and this isn't just about the DOJ, and it's not just about Google. We've talked about the FTC. They're taking Meta to court currently, asking them to divest WhatsApp and Instagram. So it really shows this push when it comes to the Trump DOJ, the Trump administration, FTC against big tech. Kind of ironic as we saw them all line up at inauguration, open up their pocketbooks. You know, we've seen them at Mar-a-Lago. For now, it seems like it's not paying off.
Okay, well, thank you for breaking it all down. And if you want more of a breakdown, you can check out more of Yasmin's reporting on the Y-axis. Just go to yasminkhorram.substack.com. Y-axis, great name. Okay, thank you so much as usual. All right, our monitors now take us to the 2025 Boston Marathon now. Look at this. CBS News Boston's Paul Burton tells us this year's runners smashed personal bests and set new course records.
Just an extraordinary day in Boston in perfect conditions as runners complete the 129th running of the Boston Marathon, crossing the finish line with great achievement and some personal bests. A picturesque day in Boston made for perfect running conditions for the 30,000 plus runners participating in the 2025 Boston Marathon. John Korir of Kenya won the men's race well ahead of the pack, even after falling down early in the race.
The last 3 miles was good, was enjoying, people were cheering up, and I was enjoying.
American Connor Mans of Utah finished 4th on Monday, and after finishing 2nd last year in Boston, 31-year-old Sharon Lokedi of Kenya won the women's race and set a new course record.
In my head, I just was like, if I'm still in it towards the end, I'm just going to give my best.
And this year was the 50th anniversary of the official wheelchair division. Marcel Hoog defended his title and won his 8th Boston Marathon, and American Susanna Scaroni won her 2nd Boston Marathon title in the women's race. Tens of thousands of runners, so many incredible stories, some running for nonprofits, others for their personal best, but everyone giving it their all to complete the grueling 26.2-mile run. In Boston, I'm Paul Burton, CBS News.
Wow, congratulations to them all. Our coverage of Pope Francis continues. Last year, CBS News' Norah O'Donnell sat down with the Pope for a historic interview. We'll have a preview next. Now taking you back out live to Vatican City, where people are remembering Pope Francis. Francis was the first pope from the Americas. He was born and raised in Argentina, where he served in many top religious positions. The Pope died just weeks after being discharged from the hospital. He battled double pneumonia and other health issues. Meanwhile, our very own Norah O'Donnell spoke with Pope Francis last year. She reports from the Vatican with more on his life and legacy.
Pope Francis's impact on the Catholic Church is extraordinary. Early on in his papacy, he got the nickname the People's Pope because of his openness and his wish to include everyone in the church. His desire to reach out to ordinary people sent the bulletproof Pope-mobiles into storage. I can remember when he said, "I cannot greet people from inside a sardine can." And this really was part of his pastoral approach. It was just one of the many topics we spoke with him about last April during our rare conversation. Never before had the Holy Father done such an interview with an American broadcast network. He was then 87 years old, and we found him warm, sharp, and engaging. More than 1.4 billion Catholics look to Pope Francis, but his reach goes even further. When Pope Francis speaks, the world listens, making him an important voice on issues of war, peace, and immigration. You talk so much about opening your heart.
Corazón cerrado se endurece.
A closed heart becomes hardened. It hardens and gets sick. It gets life sick. The heart must be open. It is true that in many people, their selfishness leads them to close up their hearts. But that can be helped by talking, discussing, helping, right? Someone who dies with a closed-up heart is a pity. They miss out on a great happiness, that of going forward with an open heart.
When you look at the world, what gives you hope?
Everything. You see tragedies, but you also see so many beautiful things. You see heroic mothers, heroic men, men who have hopes and dreams, women who look to the future. That gives me a lot of hope. People want to live, people forge ahead, and people are fundamentally good. We are all fundamentally good. Sometimes we are a little mischievous, sinners, but the heart is good.
It's interesting, Pope Francis spoke about opening your heart, but he also wanted to open the church to more people with a message of inclusiveness, whether for the LGBTQ community or women. In fact, he placed more women in positions of power in the Vatican. But notably, in our interview, he closed the door to allowing women to become deacons and priests. Stay with CBS News for the latest updates. I'm Norah O'Donnell at the Vatican.
And tonight, CBS News will re-air Norah O'Donnell's historic sit-down interview with Pope Francis. You can watch the full conversation starting at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on CBS News and streaming on Paramount+. As the world mourns Pope Francis, the Catholic Church must decide who will succeed him. We'll speak to an American cardinal who will be among those who will vote for the next pope. That's on America Decides with Major Garrett next. You're watching CBS News 24/7.